So I heard stories about the mess that was the island of Dr. Moreau, and I didn't think anything of it. I just thought it was, not a good movie. But after watching the 2018 documentary Lost Soul, The Doomed Journey of Richard Stanley's Island of Dr. Moreau, directed by David Gregory, I was shook.
We just thought that Richard Stanley doing Island of Dr. Moreau was one of the most exciting projects we'd heard of in a while.
This is going to be a huge project, and this is going to propel Richard Stanley into the superstardom that he deserves as an auteur.
And then I remembered, Richard Stanley, the guy that did Color Out of Space last year. Fantastic film, starring Nicolas Cage.
The idea how much those animals cost us? They are alpacas. Alpacas.
Also just a total acid trip on its own. And I started to really like Richard Stanley, and I was fascinated by who he is as a character.
I thought, okay, fine, I'm gonna let my guard down. And I took a huge amount of LSD.
So in this video, we're going to be talking about screenwriter and director Richard Stanley. His journey as once a small director took on a $40 million project and his eventual comeback with Color Out of Space. Richard Stanley was born on November 22nd, 1966 in South Africa. He is descended from Sir Henry Morton Stanley, who was an explorer, mostly known for exploring South Africa for his search for a missionary. Both of Richard Stanley's parents were separated. His mother's an artist and anthropologist who practiced witchcraft, which Richard Stanley grew to be interested in.
Knowing that the odds were stacked against me, I resorted to witchcraft. At that point in time, I was friendly with this warlock chappie. I said, my God, Skip, you've got to help me. You've got to save my movie. At the exact same time I went into the meeting on the other side of the world, Skip convened his coven, cut his arm, drew a sigil, and did some kind of routine to fix it and make it all right.
We don't know much about his father, except the fact that his father was the main reason for his discovery of Dr. Moreau and for his love of movies.
I grew up in southern Africa, where at that time there was no television and very little access to the media, and my dad brought home a 16mm print of King Kong when I was 4 years old. So I encountered the original Marion C. Cooper Kong when I was at a very, very young age. And apart from being completely blown away by Kong himself, very early on intrigued by this character of Carl Denham, the crazy film director character in Kong, who is determined to go to the far side of the world and bring back something the world has never seen before. And I think even as a child, I kind of thought, okay, that looks like a cool thing to do with one's life. Got my hands on a Super 8 camera when I was about 9 or 10, and like a lot of kids, started building tabletop swamps and forests and messing around with stop-motion dinosaurs in the garage.
I'd first come across the book when I was very small, 4 or 5. I remember being drawn to it, probably because it was bright red, and I'm being warned off by my parents, who consistently told me that it was too scary.
There were no film schools in South Africa, but he attended a workshop, and the teacher was questionable. However, Richard Stanley made this film called The Rites of Passage.
And one other guy, Greg Copeland, who who did the camera work on Rites of Passage, essentially used the camera equipment and the facilities. I would cut class about 1 day a week, and we'd go up the mountain, and I'd cover myself with mud, and we managed to stitch it together into a 50-minute film. But we finally showed it to John, the guy running the workshop. He completely imploded, freaked out, expelled both of us.
And then when Richard Stanley got it back, he submitted it to an international film festival in London, in which he won against other film students. And this sparked interest and actually got the first film school in South Africa. Hardware was produced by Harvey Weinstein, who gave him the wide theatrical release despite its low budget. Stanley also worked with Chris Cunningham in special effects. If you don't know who Chris Cunningham, he did the Apex Twins music videos like Little Johnny or all that stuff. He ultimately went on to do Dust Devil and Brave in the 90s afterward. Richard Stanley made many sci-fi screenplays, but were deemed too depressing and not commercial. After the success of Hardware and Dust Devil, Stanley was on the rise to be a big name in the film industry, and eventually got New Line Studios to back him on his adaptation of Island of Dr. Moreau. Stanley had worked on the vision of the story and designed the Beast People concept art to be stop motion in the film. It took Richard Stanley 4 years to develop this project.
It's a book about humanity, about man and nature, man and God, civilization, and essentially what it means to be human.
If you don't know the story of Island of Dr. Moreau, it's about a guy named Edward. He gets shipwrecked, but rescued by a passing boat who goes on the island, the home of Dr. Moreau, who's a mad scientist who creates human-like hybrids, being from animals, essentially. Stanley found his perfect spot to shoot the film, which was a rainforest outside of North Queensland, Australia. He got Marlon Brando to play Dr. Moreau. As Montgomery, they got James Woods and then Bruce Willis to play Edward. The ultimate 90s blockbuster cast. But due to Bruce Willis's divorce with actress Demi Moore, he wasn't able to be attached to the project anymore, and so they lost a big name for the film. The film was already expensive, and they needed a big name to sell tickets, so they fired James Woods and got Val Kilmer.
What appealed to me about the character was Marlon Brando, the reason I did the job.
Kilmer claims to only accept the role to work with Marlon Brando, and had shown up 2 days late to set. According to the cast and crew, he didn't learn any lines or knew much about the character.
It is, okay, so let's do this. Kilmer says, okay, one second. I would like to know how you're going to cut this together. And Richard said, well, you know, the Hendrix character, he's in the ship and he's going to get hit on the head. We don't know who hit him. We just cut to black. Camera goes back, and then you look at him and you're like, what are you doing on my ship? Or, you know, something like that, you know. And then Val, you know, always with a cigarette. Yeah, that's not gonna work, man. Well, there's gonna be a time jump. Nah, that's not gonna cut together.
Richard went to give him some direction, and Val said, Richard, directors stand behind the cameras, actors are in front of the camera. Now go stand behind the camera.
Things had begun to be increasingly difficult on the set, due to Richard Stanley being absent in his directing and attending studio meetings.
Finally, I see Richard walking around. I'm like, hey, Richard, what, you know, what's going on? And he's frantically smoking his cigarette, right? And he's just like, you know, I must be seen every day to be attempting to film something.
And when he was on set, there was an ongoing power dynamic feud between Stanley and Kilmer. And this kind of broke Stanley in a sense. Also, and this is like the first 2 days on set, a hurricane hits. As Richard Stanley was going through mental breakdowns, hiding from cast and crew, people were beginning to question him and his capability to direct this big budget film. During this waiting period also, the cast and crew essentially just partied, had sex, did drugs, got drunk every night. During this time, Marlon Brando was going through mental anguish as well. His daughter had committed suicide before production started. He had also told another cast member on set, go home, this is not a good film to work on, it's cursed. After the third day on set, New Line had decided to fire Richard Stanley, the man with the vision who developed this film for 4 years. They fired him after 4 days. It was then Richard Stanley had left the set, essentially escaped somewhere out in the jungle, and no one knew where he went. New Line became fearful that he might try to sabotage the filmmaking, so they amped the security up just to make sure. Attached to the film was Fairuza Balk, had stormed off the set after a heated exchange with New Line.
Fairuza, realizing what had happened, leapt up and gave an amazing speech to Tim, the line producer, which explaining to him exactly why it would be a disaster beyond belief if they went down that route. In the course of it all, taking it a bit too far, she threatened to cut her own heart out with a sushi knife. She ran out of the sushi restaurant, jumped in the limo parked outside, and told the driver to take her to Sydney. She had insufficient grasp of the geography of Australia, I think, to know that Sydney was on the opposite side of the continent.
However, by her own account, Balk's agent then warned her in blunt terms that the studio would ruin her and that she would never be able to work in films again if she broke her contract. So she was forced to return to the set. Now introducing John Frankenheimer, who would be the one to take credit on the film as its director.
All the other directors turned it down. They went to Philip Kaufman, he turned it down. They asked some other people, and they're like, well, how much time do we have to prepare this? 1 week? And we're working with Kilmer and Brando. We have 1 week for this script, and we have no vision. Like, it's like, no.
This older gentleman in, you know, director gear with this jungle hat on came into the restaurant.
And at one point during the dinner, I actually asked him, so what's your take on this story? There's a certain vision? And he's like, Marco, vision. That's an overused word, I'm telling you. It's not about a vision, I'm trying to tell a story here, okay?
Frankenheimer claims that he only took the film to work with Marlon Brando, but also demanded a lot of money and a 3-picture deal in exchange for his services, which he successfully did so. Richard Stanley, yes, still on the island, had met with some of the locals and convinced them to do some witchcraft around the entire set to put a curse on it. He had also met with his production designer and allegedly joked for him to burn the set down, maybe in hopes the film would be sabotaged.
The next morning, I walked down the river and discovered that there were extras from the island of Dr. Moreau. I explained that if I did that, I'd be breaking contract. That would mean that New Line could technically refuse to pay me a dime, and that I was currently still in negotiation with them. It could be a bad idea, but I did want to see what was going on. I was curious. I ended up borrowing Lewis's Dogman outfit.
And I think once that rumour started, that Richard Stanley was in the background, that I think that just grew into sort of stories about Richard Stanley then wanting to sabotage the shoot.
The shooting was supposed to take 6 weeks, but ended up taking 6 months. And as predicted, the film did terribly, but rightfully was nominated for 6 categories for the Razzie Awards, including Worst Picture, Worst Director, and it actually won Worst Supporting Actor for Marlon Brando.
Thumbs down for me, but you know, watching the film, I thought, we are all so fascinated by Marlon Brando. No other actor could get away with this performance, appearing in pancake makeup in the Pope Mobile, and then having all of those little kind of affected speeches throughout the film.
You could even at one point see his hearing aid that he uses, I'm told, or
to get his lines.
To get his lines.
To get his lines. It was,
because that's
I'm sure it was badly edited. The characters don't pay off. The relationships don't develop. The movie is a real disappointment.
I think
After that whole debacle, Stanley hadn't touched a large budget after Moreau and stuck with indies with Secret Glory in 2001, a story about a man's search for the Holy Grail, and also The White Darkness in 2002, which looks into the voodoo practices in Haiti. But Stanley's return to mainstream media was Color Out of Space in 2019. Color Out of Space is an H.P. Lovecraft story adapted by Richard Stanley. Its plot revolves around a family that lives on a secluded farm. One day, an unfamiliar meteor hits their land and sort of infects not only the land, but the characters' behavior seems to have shifted as they consume the infected water and food.
What attracted you to specifically this short?
H.P. Lovecraft's favorite story of his own work. I read it when I was 13 years old. My mum introduced me to Lovecraft. My mother's favorite author.
Speaking of farms, alpacas, huh?
The film was made for $6 to $12 million, but only made $1 million in its return. Stanley has plans on adapting more Lovecraft stories in the future. In conclusion, I love Richard Stanley. I don't know, there's something about him and his nomad ways. I really admire that he sticks to his vision and stays true to himself. I just wish that he was able to make his passion project Dr. Moreau, but in a way I sort of love the chaos of it at the same time. It just seems like the real-life absurdity of making a film became the movie. I guess we can only hope Richard Stanley keep making films that he wants to make. And if he does, I'll be watching them. Thank you guys for watching, and subscribe to hear more, as we will talk more about controversial filmmakers.